The English Mic, Learn English. Welcome to The English Mic. Learn English the fun and easy way through podcasts. From grammar tips to real-life conversations, we make speaking and understanding English simple and enjoyable. Tune in, learn on the go, and boost your confidence with every episode. Okay, so let's unpack this. We're doing a deep dive today into some really helpful ideas, actually. All about how our minds work, thinking about things like overthinking, maybe dealing with anxiety, making relationships better, that kind of thing.
Right, stuff we all grapple with.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we've been looking at insights from Dr. Julie Smith. She's a clinical psychologist, huge online presence, shares a lot of really practical wisdom.
Yeah, she's great at that.
So the goal here is really to pull out the stuff that you can use.
Yeah.
The things that might give you those little aha moments, make a difference day to day. This isn't going to be like super complicated theory. It's about getting straight to the useful bits.
Yeah, and what's so interesting, I think, is how she makes these, quite powerful psychological ideas feel really accessible, down to earth.
Totally.
She sort of realized that a lot of the core principles for just good mental well-being, while they aren't these big therapy secrets, they're fundamental life skills, really.
Right.
It's almost like she felt, this knowledge shouldn't just be kept behind closed doors in a therapist's office, because it can genuinely help so many people.
Absolutely. And it's fascinating how she built up this huge online community, almost like by accident, just trying stuff out, sharing what she knew.
Yeah.
It just shows how much people are looking for that kind of clear, reliable guidance, doesn't it?
It really does.
And here's something that struck me. Even though you might think platforms like, say, TikTok attract a younger crowd, she found people of all ages were getting something from her stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that speaks to something really universal, that human desire to understand ourselves, why we feel the way we do, why we act the way we do. Whether you're young or older, the challenges around our thoughts, our emotions, how we connect, they're pretty fundamental, aren't they?
Yeah, they really are.
So the fact that these short little videos resonated so widely, it just suggests that even small pieces of insight, if they're well explained, can have a real impact.
One thing that really stood out for me was when she talked about how predictable human behavior can be, in a way.
Interesting. Predictable how?
Well, she mentioned that after working with so many people, even people with really unique, experiences, she started seeing these underlying patterns
Right.
in how we all tend to respond in certain situations.
That's a fascinating point. It makes you think about that balance, doesn't it, between the general patterns and what makes each of us unique.
Yeah.
Because while psychology looks for those common threads, she's also careful, I think, to remind us that everyone does have their own story, their own history, their own ways of coping.
True.
So, yeah, understanding the general principles is helpful, but how we apply it. Well, that always comes down to our individual experience, doesn't it?
And speaking of patterns, she talked about getting stuck in these cycles, especially in relationships.
Oh, yes, the cycles.
She explained how therapy can be really helpful for looking at these patterns and how they often link back to things we learned really early on. These outdated coping strategies, she called them.
Outdated coping strategies, yeah.
Yeah,
Like a child learning that being loud is the only way to get attention, maybe.
exactly. And then as an adult, that same strategy might actually push people away. Doesn't work anymore.
Right. These patterns, they get so ingrained, they become habits, don't they? Even if they're not helpful anymore. And you can't just decide to stop overnight. She talks about a process, right? First, looking back, recognizing the cycle, maybe through journaling or just thinking about past situations.
Yeah.
Then, with practice, you start to notice it as it's happening in the moment.
Okay.
And that gives you that little window, that chance to respond differently, to gradually break free from those old ways.
So, okay, for someone listening who maybe isn't in therapy, what could they do just at home to start spotting these cycles?
Well, like you mentioned, journaling is something she suggests it can be really powerful. Just writing down what happens during, say, a recurring argument or a difficult situation, almost like a script, including how you felt, what you think the other person might have been feeling.
Okay.
That can start to reveal those underlying patterns. And sometimes even just talking it through with a friend you trust can give you a totally different perspective, like getting a second opinion on what's really going on.
That makes sense. Building on that idea of patterns, she also talks about core beliefs.
Core beliefs, those deep ones.
Yeah, these really deep-seated beliefs about ourselves, about the world. and how they have this huge, often unconscious influence on our relationships, how we react to things.
Right. They might have formed from really early experiences.
Exactly. And they can create these unspoken sort of rules for living that we try to follow, often to avoid triggering that core negative belief.
Can you give an example?
Sure, like someone might have a core belief of, I am not good enough.
Okay, a common one, unfortunately.
Right. And that might lead to a rule like, I must always be perfect, or I must never make a mistake.
Ah, okay. I see. And the problem with those rules is, well, they're often impossible, aren't they?
Totally impossible to live up to all the time.
So when we inevitably fall short, maybe you make a mistake.
Bang. It triggers that deep negative belief. See, I'm not good enough. And that leads to a lot of distress.
Exactly. So recognizing those core beliefs and the rules we've built around them, that's a really fundamental step in understanding why we react the way we do.
What are some other common core beliefs?
Oh, things like, I am unlovable, maybe, or I am incompetent, the world is a dangerous place. Asking yourself, what underlying beliefs might be driving my reactions here? That can be a really powerful starting point.
It really clicked for me when she connected this back to our fear of rejection, that really primal fear,
Yeah.
being left out.
Oh, yeah, that's a deep one. Evolutionary, even.
Even today, feeling rejected can trigger really intense emotional responses, can it?
Definitely. And she makes a really important point here. It's not about never having those feelings. That's just not realistic. We're wired to care what others think to some extent.
Right.
The key is learning to manage how we respond to those feelings, especially when we perceive rejection, whether it's real or imagined. It's about recognizing the story we tell ourselves about what that rejection actually means.
The story we tell ourselves. That's interesting. Now, moving on slightly, she also talked quite openly about the pressures that come with having such a big online platform.
Right, the other side of that success.
Yeah, dealing with things like feeling like an imposter, facing criticism. She's very open about the challenges of navigating all that while trying to, stay true to her values and keep some kind of healthy balance, especially with young kids.
Her experience really highlights attention, doesn't it? Attention a lot of people probably feel in society today, this constant pressure to achieve more, do more, be more.
Yeah, that hustle culture idea.
Yeah. Exactly. Even if it comes at the cost of our own well-being or what we actually truly value deep down, she sort of questions that endless pursuit of the extraordinary and emphasizes that it's perfectly okay to want a more private life, a quieter life sometimes. And this connects directly back to what she says about values. Right.
How so?
Well, how our values should guide our choices, especially when we're facing those external pressures or big decisions.
Oh, okay. And on values, she makes a really clear distinction between goals and values. I found that helpful.
Yeah. Can you unpack that a bit?
Well, a goal is something you achieve and then it's kind of done. Like running a marathon. You train, you run it, goal achieved.
Right. A finite.
Whereas a value is more like a direction, a compass point you move towards throughout your life, something you're constantly trying to align with, like being healthy or being a supportive partner.
That's a great way to put it. Values aren't destinations. They're the principles guiding how we want to be, how we want to act.
In different areas of life.
Exactly. With family, in relationships, work, health, all those domains. She suggests doing a kind of values check-in.
Okay, what does that involve?
Just thinking about what's truly important to you in these different areas. What do you stand for? And then, and this is the key bit, looking at how well your current actions actually line up with those values.
Ah, so seeing if there's a gap between what you say is important and what you're actually doing.
Precisely. And if there is a gap, well, that can show you where you might want to make some changes, shift things a bit.
It's interesting, too, how she points out that our values aren't necessarily set in stone.
Oh, definitely not.
They can change over time.
Yeah.
Right. Especially when big life stuff happens. Like what was important at 18 might be quite different after having kids, maybe. And that's okay.
Absolutely. It underlines why it's important to check in with ourselves regularly. Our values should be something we revisit as we grow, as our circumstances change.
Yeah.
It's this ongoing process, really, to make sure we're living a life that feels meaningful and authentic to who we are now.
Okay. Switching gears a bit. Let's talk about those tough days. We all have them.
Bad days.
Dr. Smith offers some really practical advice on shifting your mood. And one key thing I thought was that sometimes the quickest way to change how you feel mentally is actually to work with your body.
Yes, the mind-body connection, it's so strong. She talks about the power of things like, well, exercise, obviously.
Right.
But also listening to music that moves you, using your voice, maybe singing, or even just speaking out loud affirmations or something. And crucially, connecting with other people.
Okay.
These things can create almost immediate shifts in how we feel. It's a great reminder that our mental and physical states are just so closely linked.
Yeah.
Finding what works for you personally in those areas,
Yeah.
that can be such a valuable toolkit for getting through difficult moments.
And we absolutely cannot forget sleep. She is so clear about this.
Oh, foundational.
How essential sleep is for our mood, our mindset, just our general ability to function well. It's not a luxury, is it?
No way. It's a fundamental need and one we often sacrifice, right, in our busy lives. And that really takes a toll.
Yeah.
She really challenges that whole I'll sleep when I'm dead idea,
Mm-hmm.
pointing out that skimping on sleep has real, measurable consequences for mental health, physical health, everything. It's just, it has to be a priority.
Agreed. Now, one thing many people find tricky is building confidence.
Confidence.
Yeah. Dr. Smith shares a really interesting idea. She says something like, confidence cannot grow if we are never willing to be without it. Okay, let's think about that.
Yeah, it sounds a bit paradoxical at first, doesn't it? But the key insight, I think, is that we build confidence by stepping outside what feels comfortable.
Okay.
If we only ever do things we already feel totally confident about, well, our confidence just stays stuck within those limits.
Right, it doesn't expand.
Exactly. Real confidence, lasting confidence, it comes from facing situations where we don't feel completely sure of ourselves,
Yeah.
taking those small, manageable risks, and learning from the experience. The more we actually do something that initially makes us nervous, the more our brain kind of adapts, rewires itself slightly, and the more confident we become in our ability to handle it next time.
She even connects this to dealing with anxiety, suggesting that gradually exposing ourselves to things that make us anxious.
Yeah, in small steps.
In small, manageable steps, yeah.
Yeah.
That can actually help us become more comfortable with them over time. It's about slowly building up our tolerance, our ability to cope.
Exactly. It's a process. Like building a muscle. Gradual exposure, getting used to those anxiety triggers through consistent, intentional engagement. Our brain learns through repetition, and that applies to managing anxiety too.
Okay. And when it comes to making decisions, big or small, she really emphasizes aligning them with our core values
Back to values.
rather than just going with, how we feel in the heat of the moment.
Right, because feelings can be fleeting, can't they?
Totally. And while our feelings are valid, they're important information, relying only on short-term emotions can sometimes lead us down a path that doesn't really serve what's most important to us long-term. When we base decisions on our core values, we tend to create a life that feels more meaningful overall, even if it's not always the easiest choice right now.
And this leads really nicely into another crucial point she makes about emotions themselves.
Okay.
She reframes them as information, just information, rather than something we should automatically judge as good or bad or try to suppress.
That's such a helpful shift, isn't it? Emotions as signals.
Yeah. Signals from our brain telling us something about what might be happening internally or externally. So instead of immediately reacting to the emotion...
Like getting angry because you feel angry.
Exactly. Dr. Smith encourages us to get curious. Like, okay, I'm feeling anxious. What is this feeling trying to tell me? What's the underlying message here? How can I understand it better?
Right. So you respond thoughtfully rather than just reacting impulsively.
Precisely. And this ties into that idea that we are not our thoughts.
That's a big one too.
Huge. She explains how easily we can start believing that every single thought that pops into our head is like a fundamental truth about who we are.
Yeah, especially the negative ones.
Especially when we're stressed or dealing with those horrible, intrusive thoughts, it can be really damaging.
So the skill is what?
Observing them.
Observing them, yeah. Without judgment, ideally, and without feeling like you are those thoughts. That's a really powerful skill to cultivate. Our minds are like thought-generating machines, right? They just churn stuff out. And not all of it is accurate or helpful or even makes sense.
True.
Recognizing that gives us some distance. It allows us to choose which thoughts we engage with, which ones we give power to, rather than feeling totally controlled by every flicker that goes through our mind.
Okay. And finally, she also touches on some really simple techniques like breath work for managing anxiety.
Yeah, the power of the breath. It sounds almost too simple sometimes, doesn't it? Maybe. But she highlights how it can quickly help slow down the body's physical response to anxiety.
And it works because our breathing is directly linked to our nervous system, right?
Exactly. When we get anxious, our breathing often gets fast and shallow.
That fight or flight response kicking in.
Right. So by consciously slowing down our breath, especially making the exhale longer than the inhale, we send a signal back to our body, back to our brain, basically saying, it's okay, you can calm down.
It counteracts that physical panic response.
Yeah. It's a simple but incredibly effective way to regain a sense of control in those stressful moments, right there in your toolkit.
Okay, so, wow, we've covered a lot of ground. To kind of bring it all together, maybe summarize some key takeaways.
Good idea.
Well, first, recognizing those patterns, right? In our thoughts, in our relationships, understanding those cycles, and maybe some outdated coping mechanisms we're still using. That awareness is huge for personal growth.
Definitely. And second, I'd say the power of small, consistent actions. Building confidence, creating lasting change. It often happens gradually, step by step, not overnight transformations.
Absolutely. Third, using our core values as that compass, particularly when making decisions when emotions are running high. It helps create that more aligned, meaningful life.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Fourth, not underestimating those basics, like sleep, connection with others. They're not optional extras for mental well-being. They are fundamental, foundational.
So true. We often forget that.
And maybe fifth, remembering that emotions are just information. Approaching them with curiosity, not judgment. And tied to that, cultivating the ability to observe our thoughts without automatically identifying with them. That gives us so much more freedom. Oh, and finally, for those moments of acute anxiety, remembering simple tools like breathwork can be surprisingly effective at bringing us back to a calmer state.
Great summary. So as you're listening to all this, maybe something to think about. Here's a thought. How might consciously reflecting on what your core values really are, how might that influence a decision you're facing right now, big or small?
Or maybe consider this. How could becoming more aware of your own automatic responses when you get stressed? How could that awareness start leading to some positive changes for you?
Yeah, just something to mull over.
Yeah.
This deep dive, it's really just scratching the surface, isn't it? Exploring these really important parts of our minds, our well-being.
Just the beginning.
So we really encourage you to keep learning, keep discovering more about yourself on this journey.